They are the ones who stay close. They keep showing up, asking questions, watching carefully. Not because they want you to win, but because they need a front row seat to the moment you don't. Most guys don't realize this. They spend years trying to protect themselves from enemies they can see. The competitor, the ex, the obvious hater, and the whole time, the real threat is sitting across the table from them at Sunday dinner, smiling with their whole face. Subscribe right now, because what I am about to show you will permanently change how you read the people around you. And once you see this, you cannot unsee it. Here is the brutal truth this video is built on. You are not losing because the world is against you. You are losing because you are being emotionally managed by the people closest to you, and you don't even know it is happening. They are not evil. That is what makes this so hard. They are just people whose identity is quietly threatened every single time you grow. Every time you level up, they have to face something they would rather not, that they didn't. And the easiest way to protect their ego is not to attack you openly. It is to quietly keep you exactly where you are. This is not about paranoia. This is about pattern recognition. And after this video, you will never be anyone's comfortable ceiling again. Let me tell you about Charles. Charles was the kind of man who had everything lined up. New business, new energy. A woman he was building something real with. His circle, 5 guys he had known since college, were tight. Weekly calls, group chat, the whole thing. When Charles started talking about his business, they listened, they asked questions, they encouraged him. But then something started happening that Charles could not name at first. A feeling more than a fact. Every time he shared a win, someone in the group would immediately follow it with a story about someone else who tried the same thing and failed. Every time he got excited, there was a quiet, almost invisible deflation. Not an argument, not criticism, just a slight shifting of energy that left Charles feeling smaller than when he walked in. And here is what Charles did not understand yet. That feeling was information. In behavioral psychology, there is a documented phenomenon called social comparison threat. When someone in your close circle begins to advance, financially, romantically, socially, the people around them experience a form of identity destabilization. They don't hate you, but your progress makes them feel behind. And the brain's response to that feeling is not to accelerate their own growth, it is to slow yours. They do it without thinking. A dismissive comment here, a planted doubt there, a carefully timed, "Are you sure about this?" dropped right before your most important moment. It is not malice. It is self-preservation disguised as concern, and it is working on you right now. The man who does not recognize this pattern gives his energy to the wrong room. He waters dead soil and wonders why nothing grows. The man who sees it clearly stops explaining himself to people who have a psychological investment in his confusion. Charles eventually saw it, but only after he lost 6 months to a circle that was quietly managing his ceiling. Don't be Charles. At least not the version who stayed blind. Most guys in dating think the threat comes from outside the relationship. The other man, the ex, the competition. They build walls facing the wrong direction, and while they are watching the door, the quiet damage is happening right next to them, in the same bed, at the same dinner table, in the softest voice they have ever trusted. Charles was not a man who was failing. That is what made this so hard to see. He was building. He was in motion. He had direction, discipline, and a level of focus he had never operated with before. He was waking up earlier. He was saying no to things that used to waste his time. He was becoming, slowly and deliberately, someone different from the man she had originally fallen for. And that was exactly the problem. The woman in his life was not a bad person. She was not manipulative in the way movies show you manipulation. There was no calculated plan, no strategy. What she felt was something far more human than that, and in many ways far more dangerous because of it. She felt the ground shifting beneath her. She felt the version of Charles she had learned to love, the one who needed her steadiness, the one who called her when things went wrong, the one who leaned into her when the world pushed back, slowly becoming someone who no longer needed those things in the same way. And that feeling, That quiet loss of role registered in her nervous system as threat. Not a threat from the outside, a threat from within her own relationship. When Charles was struggling, she was essential. She was the anchor. She was the one who held things together when he could not. That is not a small thing for a person to be. That kind of necessity feels like love, and it is love, but it is also identity. And when Charles began to stabilize, when he stopped stumbling and started moving with real momentum, she lost the version of the relationship that made her feel most needed, most secure, most powerful. She never said any of this out loud. She probably never even thought it in those words, but the behavior came anyway. You work too much. I just miss the old you. Do you even care about us anymore? Every one of those lines was real. The emotion behind them was genuine. But genuine emotion is not the same as accurate information, and what those lines were communicating beneath the tears and the softness and the love she absolutely did feel was a simple and dangerous instruction. Come back down. Be the man I know how to handle. Charles did what most men do. He heard pain and he moved to fix it. He pulled back from his work. He spent more time managing her comfort than building his future. He softened his edges to smooth her anxiety, and for a few weeks, the relationship felt warmer. She seemed happier. Things felt easier. But Charles felt something else, a kind of slowness, a thickness in the air. He was moving through his days like a man walking against a current he could not see. His momentum had not disappeared dramatically. It had been gently, lovingly, quietly absorbed into the comfort of a relationship that needed him to stay still. Most guys never name this. They feel it, the way you feel a draft before you find the open window, but they cannot locate its source. They blame their own discipline. They blame the market. They blame timing. They never look at the soft hands that pulled them backward, because those hands never felt like a threat. They felt like home. Here is what the man who understands dating psychology knows. Attraction and attachment are not the same force. A woman who is genuinely attracted to you does not need you to be smaller to feel safe with you. She does not experience your growth as abandonment. She does not feel threatened by your ambition because she is not depending on your weakness to define her role. The woman who is attracted to you, truly attracted to the man you are becoming, will push you out the door on the mornings you want to stay comfortable. She will ask you why you are not moving faster. She will refuse to be your excuse. The woman who is only attached to you needs the version of you she first met to remain intact, because that is the version she built her sense of security around. And any deviation from that version, no matter how upward, feels like a violation of the agreement she made with herself. The leash in that kind of relationship does not look like a leash. It looks like concern. It feels like love. It sounds like the voice of someone who genuinely wants you close. But the direction it pulls is always the same. Back, down, still. Charles eventually saw it. Not in a single dramatic moment, but in the accumulation of small ones. The morning he caught himself apologizing for being focused. The night he declined a critical meeting to manage her mood. The afternoon he realized he had not worked on his business in 11 days, and that somehow, in the warm haze of keeping the peace, he had not even noticed. That was the morning he stopped explaining himself. Not with an argument, not with a speech. He simply stopped treating his ambition as something that required her permission to exist. He stopped apologizing for the version of himself he was becoming, and in doing so, he discovered something that changed everything. The right woman does not ask you to choose between her and your growth. She becomes part of the reason you grow faster. If you are currently with someone who only feels loved when you are stuck, that is not a relationship protecting your future. That is a relationship quietly consuming it. There is a specific type of person in every man's life who never raises his voice, never throws a punch, never says a single word that sounds like hate. He is warm. He is consistent. He is, by every visible measure, exactly the kind of friend a man should want in his corner. And he is the most dangerous person in your circle. Not because of what he does to you, because of what he does with the information you freely give him. Charles had known this man for years. They had come up together, shared the same starting point, moved through the same early struggles. When Charles began building his business, this man was the first to call. Not once a week, every other day. He wanted to know everything: how the client meeting went, what the numbers were looking like, what the next move was, whether the strategy had shifted, how Charles was feeling about it all. And Charles, who was hungry for someone to believe in what he was doing, gave him everything. It felt like loyalty. It felt like the kind of friendship most men never find. Someone genuinely invested in the process, not just waiting around for the outcome. Charles left those calls feeling lighter, feeling seen, feeling like the work he was doing had a witness who cared. He did not understand yet what kind of witness he actually had. There is a psychological process that most men have never heard of, but every man has experienced. It is called premature social reward. When you share a goal and someone responds with genuine enthusiasm, your brain releases dopamine, the same chemical that fires when you actually achieve something. The brain, which is always looking for shortcuts, begins to blur the line between telling and doing. The announcement starts to feel like the accomplishment. The update starts to carry the same emotional weight as the result. You feel the win before you have built anything, and the moment that happens, your hunger changes. Not dramatically, subtly. The edge dulls slightly. The urgency softens. You have already received a version of the reward your brain was working toward, and so the engine, without you ever noticing, drops a gear. Charles was feeding himself the feeling of progress without the substance of it. Every call, every detailed update, every enthusiastic response from this man was quietly stealing momentum that should have gone into the work. But that was only half the damage. Because the man on the other end of those calls was not investing his attention out of love. He was building a file. He knew the timeline. He knew the obstacles. He knew which clients were uncertain, which numbers were soft, which parts of the plan were still unproven. He knew exactly where the structure was weakest. And he was patient, the way a man is patient when he is not hoping for your success, but waiting for your failure. When the first real setback came, this man was the first to call. He said all the right things. He sounded sorry. He put his hand on Charles's shoulder, metaphorically, if not literally, and he said the words that revealed everything he had been carrying the entire time. "I always had a feeling this might be harder than you thought. Not I believe in you. Not what do you need. Not let's figure this out together. I always had a feeling." That sentence is the fingerprint of a man who was never on your side. Because a man who is genuinely in your corner does not store private doubts about your potential. He does not have a feeling he was quietly holding on to. The man who wants you to win is surprised when you stumble. The man who needed you to stumble has been rehearsing his sympathy for months. Charles heard it and something shifted in him, not with anger, with clarity. He began to look back across the months of updates and enthusiasm and check-in calls with new eyes, and what he saw was not friendship, it was surveillance dressed in warmth. A man who needed a front-row seat to Charles's life because his own was not moving, and watching Charles fail would have been the most comforting thing to happen to him all year. So Charles went quiet, not cold, not dramatic. He did not end the friendship with a confrontation or a speech. He simply stopped giving the updates. When the calls came, he was fine. Things were good. Nothing specific to report. He moved his real work, his real numbers, his real plans into a room that had no audience. The calls got less frequent, then occasional, then rare. And the people who had been receiving his weekly reports began to describe him to others using words that sounded like criticism, but were actually something else entirely. He's different now. He's not the same. He keeps to himself. What they were really saying was this: we can no longer track him. We can no longer measure ourselves against him. We have lost our access, and access for that kind of person, is everything. They do not want your success. They want your story. They want the ongoing drama of watching a man reach for something because it distracts them from the stillness of their own lives. Your ambition is their entertainment. Your failure would be their relief. The most powerful thing Charles did was not work harder or think sharper or change his strategy. It was silence. He stopped performing his progress for people who were secretly grading it against his destruction. He stopped feeding an audience that had purchased tickets to his collapse. And in the silence, something remarkable happened. The work got cleaner. The thinking got sharper. The momentum that had been leaking into those calls came back and went into the business where it always belonged. The man who tells no one is dangerous, not because he is hiding, but because he is building. This is going to be uncomfortable, but you need to hear it. There is a test that life runs on every person around you. It does not announce itself. There is no warning. It does not happen during your worst moments, when you are broke, when you are lost, when you are sitting in the dark trying to figure out your next move. Anyone can show up for that. Struggle is easy to be present for because struggle does not require anyone to feel anything difficult. Struggle creates closeness through shared pain. It is warm and familiar, and it costs the people around you nothing. The real test happens the moment you win, not a small win, the kind that cannot be explained away, the kind that is undeniable, the kind where something you have been quietly building in the dark finally breaks into the light, and the people around you have to decide in real time whether they are genuinely happy about it or whether they are something else entirely. Charles had that moment. 2 years of work. 2 years of early mornings and declined invitations and conversations he cut short because he had something more important to get back to. 2 years of being called distant and obsessed and told he was taking things too seriously. And then one afternoon it happened. A deal closed. 6 figures, the kind of number that changes the entire shape of a man's future. He came home that night carrying something he had never carried before. Not just money, not just a number, a confirmation. Proof that the vision he had been protecting, the one he had been quietly working toward while everyone around him shifted with doubt, was real. He told her. She said the right words. "That is amazing. I am so proud of you." And Charles almost accepted it. He almost let the warmth of the moment absorb what happened in the fraction of a second before those words came out of her mouth. But something in him, some new and sharper part of the man he had been building himself into, caught it. The pause. Not long, half a second at most. The kind of pause a person needs when their brain is processing something it was not prepared for and has to quickly locate the correct emotional response. Her face moved through something before it settled into pride. Something that came and went so fast that a less observant man, a man still drunk on the win, would have missed it entirely. Charles did not miss it. And then within 3 minutes, before the moment had even finished breathing, the conversation shifted. Just be careful. Do not get too ahead of yourself. You know how these things can go. Said with love. Said with the kind of soft concern that sounds like wisdom. Said by someone who had been by his side for 2 years and who, in the moment of his greatest confirmation, could not fully arrive. Most guys never catch this. They are too busy feeling the wind to watch the room. They hear the right words, and they accept them because they want to believe in the people they have chosen. And that desire, the desire to believe, becomes the very thing that keeps them blind. Here is what you need to understand about human psychology. The face is slower than the brain. A person can decide what to say in the time it takes to draw a breath. But the face, the first microsecond of genuine involuntary reaction that moves before the decision does, before the performance begins, before the socially correct response is selected and delivered, in that half-second gap, before a person has had time to arrange themselves, you will see the truth of exactly what your success means to them. The people who genuinely want you to win do not need that half-second. There is no gap between what they feel and what they show you because what they feel is uncomplicated. It is pure. When you win, their face opens before they have even processed the words. They are already standing up. They are already reaching for their phone to tell someone. They are already looking at you differently, not just with the love they already had, but with something new layered on top of it. A deeper respect, an expanded vision of who you are and what you are capable of. That reaction cannot be faked. And more importantly, it does not need to be manufactured. It simply arrives. The person who is secretly against you responds differently. The words are right, the tone is warm, but the energy underneath is a half degree too cool. The excitement is present, but it lives only in the words, not in the body, not in the eyes, not in that first unguarded second before the performance begins. They say the right things, and somehow you still walk away from the conversation feeling slightly smaller than when you walked in. You cannot explain it immediately. You just feel it, a flatness where there should have been fire. Pay attention to that feeling. It is not insecurity. It is information. Here's the behavior shift. After your next significant win, say less. Share the minimum. Watch what happens before the response comes. Watch the body before the words arrive. Watch the energy in the room and notice whether it rises to meet you or quietly recalibrates to contain you. The people who light up without being asked, without being performed for, without needing time to locate the correct reaction, those are your people. Protect them, invest in them, build with them. The ones who need that half second, those are your data points. You do not need to confront them. You do not need to announce what you have seen. You simply need to remember it the next time you're deciding how much of your future to hand them. The truth about the people around you is not hidden in how they treat you when you are down. It is written all over their face in the half second before they decide to smile. We arrive at the final shift, and this is where it either happens or it does not. Most men reach this point and make one of two mistakes. Both feel reasonable in the moment. Both will cost you everything if you let them. The first is paranoia, the man who sees the pattern clearly and then overcorrects. He cuts everyone. He trusts no one. He builds walls so high and so thick that nothing can reach him, including the things worth having. He becomes an island and calls it strength. He mistakes isolation for power and spends the next several years alone, protected, and completely stagnant. He stopped being managed, but he also stopped being built. The walls kept the threat out and the growth in. The second mistake is quieter and far more common. The man who sees the pattern feels the discomfort of what he has recognized and then slowly talks himself out of it. He decides he is overthinking. He goes back to the comfortable lie. He returns to the circle, to the relationship, to the rooms that required him to be smaller. And within weeks, the same hands that were quietly pulling him backward have found their grip again. He did not miss the truth. He just chose the comfort of pretending he did. Neither of those is the answer. The answer is something colder and more precise than either. It is not about who you cut or who you keep. It is about what you stop building your identity on. Think about what actually made those people's opinions feel so heavy. It was not their words. It was not even their half-second pauses or their quiet doubts or their carefully placed caveats. It was the fact that you had built the foundation of your self-worth on ground that included them. Every time one of them shifted, every time the energy in the room cooled at your win, every time someone you trusted said, "Are you sure about this?" you felt it in your foundation because they were part of your foundation. Remove them from that load-bearing structure and watch what happens. Their movements stop mattering. Their approval becomes irrelevant. Their doubt becomes background noise in a room you are no longer standing in. This is what cold architecture means. It means building an internal structure so stable, so independently load-bearing, that no single person's withdrawal or disapproval or hidden resentment can compromise the direction you are moving in. Not the woman who needs your struggle to feel needed, not the friend who tracks your updates more than your results, not the person in your circle whose face needed half a second to find the correct response to your greatest win. None of them can touch you when you are no longer asking them to hold anything up. In dating psychology, this is the most attractive configuration a man can exist in. Not the most aggressive man, not the most emotionally expressive man. The man who has built something inside himself that does not require external confirmation to remain standing. That man walks into a room differently. He speaks differently. He listens differently. He is not performing stability. He is not managing the impression he makes. He is simply operating from a place that most people have never encountered in another person and cannot fully explain, but can absolutely feel. Women feel it instantly. The right ones move toward it. Charles did not write a speech. He did not confront his circle or sit down with her and explain what he had observed. He did not post about his realizations or announce a new version of himself to anyone. He simply made a quiet internal decision that changed the entire geometry of how he moved through the world. He stopped showing up to rooms that required him to be smaller. That was it. No drama. No declaration, just a slow and methodical withdrawal of energy from the places and people that had been using it to keep him in place. He redirected that energy into the work, into the vision, into the version of himself he had been quietly becoming, despite everyone around him. 6 months later, the business was real. Not conceptual, not promising, real. And the woman who came into his life during that period was a different species from what he had known before. She had never once asked him to slow down. She had never looked at his wins with a controlled face. From the very first conversation, she pushed him, not because she was performing the role of supportive partner, but because she was genuinely wired that way. She was attracted to the direction, not threatened by it. She expanded in the presence of his ambition, instead of contracting. And his old circle, the ones who had tracked his updates and planted their quiet doubts and smiled with faces that needed half a second to arrive. They watched from a distance. Some of them reached out eventually, warmer than before, more respectful, as if the version of Charles that no longer needed their approval had finally earned it. Others simply faded, and Charles felt nothing about either outcome because he had stopped measuring his direction by their reaction. That is the cold truth that this entire video has been building toward. Some of the people closest to you right now are not rooting for you. They are waiting. They are comfortable. They have built something in the relationship between you that depends on you staying exactly where you are. And they will never admit that. Not to you, not to themselves. The only move that matters is the one that removes their power permanently, not by confronting them, not by explaining what you have seen, but by building a version of yourself so internally solid, so completely independent of their applause, that their waiting becomes irrelevant. If this video opened something in you, if you felt even one moment of recognition while watching this, hit subscribe right now. Because what I build on this channel is not motivation. It is not theory. It is a blueprint for the man who is done being managed. The next video goes even deeper. The work starts now.